Dominique, Lorna, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe it would be great to start with if you can both introduce who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. I'm Lorna Davies. I'm the CFO of GHO Capital Partners. We're a private equity fund specialising in healthcare. And I've had a career in financial services spanning nearly 30 years now. So delighted to be here.
And I'm Dominique Highfield. I'm CFO at Bloom and Wild. We care
Mm.
wildly and send lots of people flowers. And I'm mum of two. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. I think the first place that we were going to start with was talking about personal brand. And I think this means different things to different people. But it would be great to hear a bit more about how you've built your personal brand and how that might have changed over the years that you've worked in each of your companies.
So I think the focus from my personal brand for me is just staying as close to who I am outside work as inside work. Then I think it feels authentic. I personally don't have a work persona and an outside work persona. And I think in some ways that is my brand. I'm quite casual with my team and my staff, for example. I think I'm quite chatty. I think almost sometimes leaning into being a woman in a male dominated environment is part of my brand. I feel like I like to explore kind of fashions, bring all of that into the workplace as well, to kind of perhaps stand out as a female. Obviously, private equity and financial services is pretty male. So for me, I think that's my brand. I don't try and be more male. I think I'm quite female in work and try and stay exactly true to who I am as a person, whether that's in the office or outside.
Do you think that's changed over the years as you've got more confident in a male dominated environment, or have you always been that kind of, or have you always kind of had that approach?
I think I've always had that approach. I think when you spend so long and so many hours at work as well, for me, it just feels easier. And perhaps to your point, when I think about starting at PwC or some of my earlier workplaces, perhaps just seeing a sense of kind of seeing if it felt okay just to be myself in that space. And I actually think it is always okay. And people really relate to knowing the real you, and you're
Yeah.
not sort of trying to become something that is alien to you outside the workplace. So I think I've always done that really.
I think we'll come on to this in some of the later questions, but in terms of kind of that male dominated environment, what is that like for you? In I know that obviously the world of private equity is generally very male dominated, but what does that look like for you at the moment in GHO?
So we are more it's a real focus for us at GHO. I chair the D&I committee, and we're committed to supporting more women and more minorities of ethnic minorities, socioeconomic minorities, everyone to have a place in private equity. But I think it'd be remiss for me not to say that private equity does remain predominantly male, particularly at the senior level.
Mm.
Most PE CFOs are male. Most partners in private equity firms are male. So we've got a long way to go, basically. But because I've always been in financial services, so I had time at RBS. I've had time at two other private equity firms before GHO. It's something I'm familiar with, I would say. And you do see more 50-50 at lower levels. I think we've just got that work to do to
Mm.
really continue to support and inspire people to move up. So it's a constant for me that I'm used to, I would say.
Yeah,
I'd love to see more change, but
I think we've got a long way to go.
Lorna, it was really interesting hearing you say about being you close to home is also you at work.
yes,
It's definitely the same for me as well. I think my values cut through and my personality cuts through both at home and at work. But
absolutely.
I would say it's definitely changed in terms of. I think when I was younger, I think I took myself very seriously. When I first started PwC, took myself very seriously. I was TM Lewin, head to toe,
Yes,
sort of
yeah. I
dressing
know
for the man as
exactly what
well.
you mean.
But I think as I've sort of got more confident and as I've got older, I think I've started I still take my work very seriously, but I think I take myself slightly less seriously. And I would say I probably haven't worked hard to create a brand. I think I've worked really hard and I've been really authentic, and I've been
And that
kind to
is then
people,
part of your
and
brand.
then that
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
your and so for people listening that are trying to create a brand, I haven't purposely gone out and done that, and I don't know many people that do. I think just being yourself and working hard and being kind to people, I think then naturally that
Mm.
creates a brand for you.
Yeah,
Would you
absolutely.
say there are moments in your career where you've kind of gained confidence, or they've been kind of pivotal moments that have kind of made you
100%.
become who you are and how you go about things?
100%. And they're always the really hard parts. So I think it's in those really difficult, it's like how you build a diamond, right? I'm not saying I'm a diamond, but I do like diamonds. It's how you build a diamond is under severe pressure. And I think it's in those moments that I've really learned. So whether it was going through COVID, whether it's going through big transformations, leading redundancy programs, when it's like purple bricks and you have to save it from administration. And it's in those really hard moments that I feel like my resilience and my confidence has grown. And I think when you get through those really difficult things in your career or in your life, it then gives you confidence to put yourself into new situations or to tackle hard things and know that you can get through that, and that you will get through it and things
Yeah.
will pass, and you'll come out stronger and better for it.
How do you, so I think people often talk about confidence and imposter syndrome. Is that imposter syndrome? And I think it's actually, it gets too much airtime. But how did you ever feel that at any points in your
100%.
career, maybe at the start?
Yeah, we still do. So I think we need to break down imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome, where you're thinking, I'm not good enough for this job, or I don't know what I'm doing. I think that's a confidence piece, and that's a learning opportunity. And to your point, we need to reframe it as a learning opportunity. Thinking, I'm not good at this job, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to get found out. That's a bit of paranoia. Maybe have a relax, have a hot bath, take a CBD, and maybe go and talk to somebody. But it's when you're thinking, I shouldn't be doing this job, I don't belong. And I think that's a very different thing. It's what you touched on, being a sort of a single female in some environments. I think when you look and you don't feel like you look or feel like you belong, I think for me, that's exactly where you're supposed to be. I think that's where you own it. That's where you lean into it. That's where you should be proud and celebrate your differences. And that's where you're trailblazing and you're doing something for other people that are going to go in your footsteps. So I
Yeah.
think breaking down the imposter syndrome from, is it a confidence issue? Is it a bit of paranoia? You probably just need to sleep in a long bath. Or is it you don't belong? And I think that's where you should be really proud and own it.
How have you felt? So you've obviously moved to different businesses over the years. When you started at some of these new places, did you feel like you were 100% equipped, or you had the skill set? And I ask that question because I always think about those stats around, if a woman is looking at a job spec and has 80% of it, she won't apply. Whereas if a man has 60% of it, he might apply. How have you felt starting on day one, thinking, actually, I know I'm really not good at that, but have you given yourself that confidence?
I don't think I'm not good at that. I think I haven't done that yet. And so that's a different. And I'm about to start a new job as well. It's a big listed job in May, and I've not done that scale before. But there are bits that I have done before, and I also know I've done hard things before, and I also know that I can do hard stuff, and I will learn hard stuff, and I can speak to people and get support. So I absolutely do put myself in those situations. Um, I'm not afraid of change. I think that comes from having resilience and confidence. But yeah, absolutely. I'm always in situations where I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not proud. I ask for help, and I know that I can do hard stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I feel women typically do put themselves in those situations less, but I don't. I think one of the key things is not being afraid to ask for help. I think it's served me really well in my career. I'm not proud.
Yeah, which I think is so interesting when I've managed men versus women, that this disparity you see around being vulnerable, which I actually think women are generally much more open to being vulnerable and saying, I actually don't know, than men do.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think on that point, that's a really valuable skill as well. When you're managing people, you don't want people in the team pretending
yeah.
it's okay or pretending they understand. It's much more useful to you to have someone that comes and says, I'm actually struggling with this area. I'm not sure I'm following the technicality, for example. That is a strength that should be rewarded. And I think sometimes we place too much emphasis on the confidence of being like, everything's okay, I've
Fake
got
it till you
everything
make it.
covered, and actually valuing the honesty of someone that says, 90% I'm good. Can I just speak to you about this 10%? I haven't done this area before. That should be
Yeah.
valued. And I encourage everyone, as I'm sure we would, all women, to feel they can say that. And that's the way you grow, really, and learn. and don't sort of, it covered over, and you don't have the chance to have a learning experience in that moment. So
In terms of how have you managed that kind of, I guess, the theme of imposter syndrome in the world of private equity?
I really echo what Dominique's saying, and I don't love the word imposter syndrome. One, because I think it's always associated with women, and that in itself is unhelpful. I don't think men are asked about imposter syndrome, and I don't think men use that vocabulary. So I've got the same hesitations. That being said, to Dominique's points earlier, I think there are differences. One thing I'd say, and perhaps for people starting out, I think is as you go through your career, just the actual facts of what you've achieved in each job, and even external validation like your performance ratings, your sponsors in firms. Once you have quite a significant catalogue, I think it's harder for your brain to say, you can't do this, because just the sort of looking back, sometimes I think it's helpful looking at your CV, looking at those ratings, where people were telling you what you were doing and you were doing well in several different organizations. That's not a fluke. And I think sometimes just sitting back and seeing what you've done gives you more confidence. And that comes through as you sort of develop your career.
I've got an amazing coach, and he said exactly this. And if anyone's going on maternity leave, I always encourage them to do this: is to create their sort of metaphorical trophy cabinet, and so to document all of those things and to remind themselves
such a
of
good
these.
way of framing it as a
Yeah,
trophy cabinet.
yeah,
And I think sometimes women are trained to be very modest and trained to downplay their achievements, which is a nice thing personally. No one likes someone that's full of themselves, but you can go too far the other way, and you don't even have to say it out loud. It's just for you to think,
yeah.
well, hang on a minute. I've proved myself and delivered well and performed well on record at these 4, 5 listed companies, top performing funds, global, big 4 firms. Then I just need to take a moment and think, I have done that. There's no reason why I can't do the next challenge.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The other thing my coach taught me was, one thing was around having this metaphorical trophy cabinet, and to add to it and to remind yourself of it so you can go into it when you're having those difficult days. The other thing he taught me was to have one of these triggers that reminds you of how proud you are. It might have been a score you got in an exam. It might be a nickname that you got because you're so brilliant. It might have been a promotion in your job title, something that you earn that you feel really proud of. And in those moments, when you're in the board meeting or in a tough, like, you write it in the top corner. And so mine's an exam result that I did a few years ago, and it was quite good. And so now when I'm in a tricky room, if I'm having a moment of doubt, I'll just be writing the number at my top right hand corner, so you can see when I'm in a
Oh, I love
particularly.
that.
But it's that trigger
Wow.
that just reminds you, I'm here for a reason, and I
You've
deserve to
earned
be
it.
here, and I earn to be it. So I think having those little triggers, just to your point, just for
Yeah.
yourself,
Just for yourself.
just to ground you and to remind you
Yeah.
why you're there. And to your point, did I get it earlier in my career? I still get it. I get it every day. I get it every day. And but there's also a point you meant about your team. Actually, you want to be surrounded by brilliant people, and if you're not, you're probably not learning. So I also get it every day, but learning all the time as well.
On that topic of being in the boardroom, you're both incredibly successful. How have you managed? I imagine you have been in boardrooms where you might be the only woman, or you might be one of very few women. How have you managed that dynamic and, speaking up at the time and just kind of, I guess, making your mark in a boardroom like that?
I think, firstly, having the confidence. So you're there to talk about the numbers, predominantly, unless you're also there for wider leadership and culture. But if we think about the numbers, you are in command of your numbers, and no one knows them as well as you. So I can't stress the amount of preparation I would do. And sometimes it can feel disproportionate to, I'm going to be speaking for 3 minutes. But before those 3 minutes, I would have done hours of work. I will take in all the backing from my team. I will try and brainstorm all the questions that could come up. I also find a tip for the dynamic with, often with several males in the room. Sometimes I just be very specific, particularly with our managing partners. What area do you want me to cover? What area would you like to cover? And be quite precise on who is doing the talking when, to avoid cutting over or someone feeling like that was my area and actually I want to deliver that message. I think there's quite a lot of preparation sometimes to say, will you lead this? What messaging do you want me to say? to work collaboratively
Mm.
with the other people in the room. And I think sometimes a more male dynamic is quite a lot of cutting over, we can see. And I think trying to bring a kind of calm, this is my area, I know when to speak and when to pass over, makes me feel it's an easier
Yeah.
dynamic. I'm not great at interjecting or trying to speak, so I find a more structured approach to a board meeting or a meeting works for me. I'm not the best at interjecting or speaking over. And again, that may be a slightly gendered thing, but that's how I kind of approach it.
Yeah.
To your point, I have been the only woman in the board, apart from people bringing lunch or taking notes. I have been, but not for a while now. And I think I've been quite purposeful about joining companies where there is that dynamic, where it's more 50-50 in the boardroom. I think preparation is absolutely key. The other thing that I like to do is do a do feel know. So I spend a lot of time not just thinking about the numbers, but thinking about the story as well, and what do we want the audience to do, to feel, and to know, and to try and create a story around the numbers. And I think that helps bring it to life. I'm probably not as clever as Lorna, so I think in threes, and so every slide I just have 3 bullets. I don't talk to the numbers; I talk to the story. But I've got all the numbers, to your point, in my armory. And I'm also not afraid to take things away. I would much rather take something away than fumble or make something up in the
Yeah.
space and follow up afterwards. But yeah, I think at the beginning, my entrance into the boardroom, when I was one of the fewer women or the only woman, I felt I had to say something to have a point of view, and probably said, interjected in things that I probably didn't need to. And I think now I'm sort of much more confident staying quieter. That it's a funny thing. I feel quite confident interjecting, but so much so that sometimes I would try and over sort of overcompensate.
Yeah.
And so now I think I feel much more happy just letting things run and letting things flow, and then maybe coming in with my point of view at the end. But I always felt I had to be one of the first, and I've definitely, as I've grown up and matured and got more confidence, I let things play out a little bit more before I jump in.
Yeah. Do you think that it's such an interesting point that around how you approach it as alongside, numbers, but story and context and how you built that? Do you feel the role of the CFO has changed or evolved? I say that because it doesn't feel like it's so numbers driven and remember when I was at university and you studied like the role of a CFO and it was like a bean counter. Do you feel like that actually there's so much more value it feels like you add as a CFO outside of just numbers?
I think the stereotype has changed. So when we probably started in practice, it was like white grey man in grey suit. Now it's not.
Yeah.
So I think the stereotype has changed. And then with that, I think particularly in the world of AI and in the world, sorry, we've done like 20 minutes and we haven't mentioned AI. So in the world of AI, it was time. In the world of AI, in the world where the CEOs that I work with are so numerate and like data literate, more so probably than I am. It's not just about numbers. Everyone in the company has got data to their fingertips. It's about how you can create the sort of strategy around it and the so what, and you can drive people to action. So for me, being a CFO isn't just about numbers. It's about driving action, whether it's with investors, with shareholders, with the employees, and sort of and sort of all galvanizing people behind what the numbers tell us and so what of the numbers. But yeah, the stereotypes definitely changed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2 things absolutely on the AI and the data. I think when I started, certainly if you think about the accounting and even just doing the financial statements, that there was no AI. So you had to know that technical knowledge, or you were referring to big, chunky books of accounting standards, etc. Now we have to acknowledge that anyone can go into ChatGPT and say, how do I do lease accounting? Blah, blah, blah. It's all there for you. So I think the CFO, the old school kind of technical accounting knowledge in the numbers, in the books, knowing the standards has totally changed in a good way, enabling you to spend more time on strategy, forward-looking thinking. So I think that will be a big change and will impact junior accounting right up to the CFO as we see AI and automation and data tools come in and do so much more of the base work for us. I think then the CFO has to architect that strategy and has to really understand data systems, how things are linking, how I think there's much more value now to being able to piece together a ledger, a payroll system, expenses, dashboards, real time, all your kind of systems architecture and infrastructure, that's for you to design in a way that, in the old days you had a general ledger and
Yeah.
Excel. So you're being asked to do quite a lot more. I also think in small firms, which is more my experience in private equity, those firms tend to be quite small. The CFO is the obvious person to do a lot of other things as well. So you may not have the luxury of different heads of operational departments. You may not have the luxury of a COO as well. So you may be called to get involved in an office move, the staff offsite, PR, press, planning with investor relations is quite a broad role, and it can be as well. So I think the challenge is to maintain finance as best in class finance department and make sure you're strategic for the firm, but balance the juggle of being pulled in
Yeah.
all sorts of directions now.
In terms of managing your teams and how you've interacted, and it wouldn't be an International Women's Day podcast if we didn't talk about working in a male-dominated field. How have you managed, maybe more tricky personalities or maybe more larger teams which are more male-dominated? How have there been tips, or how have you gone about those things?
I think it's definitely got easier. I think when I started my career, I definitely experienced some of the harder things, like sexual harassment or
Mm.
discrimination or inappropriate jokes or stereotyping. I think, much like many women, have sort of experienced all of those hard things. I think it's definitely made me a better leader now, and it's definitely made me a better parent, and it's made me stronger. I don't experience those. I'm speaking really candidly. The role that I'm in and the company that I'm in, I don't experience those things as much anymore. And I think that's, I know we've got a long way to come. I went to an event the other day, and I went with my CEO. And I was standing by the coat room, and another CEO came up and gave me their coat. And I was like, no, no, sorry, I'm the CFO with the CEO. So there's definitely, and I sort of laugh it off, and I sort of make them feel bad, which I probably wouldn't have done in the beginning. But I think I definitely experience it less at the moment, and I think that's also virtue of the fact that I am purposely in sort of a more female centered organization. But I think with all of these things, when you are facing, I think using them for your resilience and the strength that you can then go and be a better leader as a result. But Lorna, you're probably a different field to me in financial services.
It is more male. I'm just trying to think of the challenges of managing. I suppose it's just the challenges of managing disparate personalities, really. I think I've always tried to create balanced, diverse teams. Certainly, my current team where I am, we've got a really great mix of male, female, ethnic minorities, different religions, and different socioeconomic backgrounds, which we're really proud of. I think diversity then brings its strength as a team. So the more different viewpoints I have in that team, the better. Um, I have managed some what we'd say are classic male traits, I guess. Strong alpha personalities, struggles sometimes to take critique or constructive feedback, tendency to go off potentially and do their own thing. Um, but I try and look at those are some of the challenging behaviors. How can we make those positive? So it may be that kind of personality, a real alpha male in your team is incredibly positive for visibility of finance within the wider organization. Perhaps that person can really get on quite naturally with the deal team. Perhaps that can help finance overall. Perhaps that person is great at comms, wants to speak to the partners in a way that other members
Yeah.
of the team might not. And I want to be careful not to gender that totally. Obviously, I've worked with some amazing, super confident women as well. So I think sometimes the challenge of managing is trying to work the positives as much as you can for that person and think how can that augment your team as a whole. Similarly, some of the women, and again, not to gender stereotype, but obviously I have worked over my career with much quieter women who really try and shun the spotlight, tend to not be so comfortable presenting in firm-wide situations, tend to shun the limelight, tend not to put their hand up, tend not to do what we were talking about earlier until they're 110% confident they can do everything. And that is a great team player. So you're maximizing their strengths and really working with the positives of that character. They may be incredibly great mentoring younger team members and a great sounding board. And then you're trying to encourage them and work with them to sort of build their profile in the firm. So I think everything's kind of give and take. Some classic male traits bring strengths, and you need to work on other things. Some classic female traits bring some great strengths, but you need to help them work on other things. So I try not to look at it too much about male, the individual, I guess is what I'm saying. Each
Just
individual.
managing each person for their trying to get the best out of them.
Exactly. And being very centered as we are at GHO of having a diverse and equitable recruitment program such that we are trying to create a really balanced workforce for the next generation of leaders.
Yeah.
So
Dominic, you've mentioned a few times now about, I guess, Bloom and Well being much more 50-50. Is that something that's important to you when you're looking at your next or the roles that you've been in? Is that something you've considered in your decisions that you've made?
Yeah, it is. It is because I feel to your point about being able to be authentic at work. I think at work for so long, and it's so important to me,
Yeah.
and it's such a huge part of my world that I want to be able to feel like I can be myself. And I've had some brilliant friends and mentors of other women on the C-suite, and so it is something that I actively seek out. Um, I think having this diversity of thought, it's not just for me about men or women. It's about also having different education level, like different education backgrounds, about having different ages and different ethnicities and different religions, and for me, it's not just about men or women. It's having that diversity because I think if you can be representative of the consumer and of the people in the organisation, you'll be a better organisation for it as well.
Yeah.
Particularly as I'm in normally consumer brands, I think it's really important.
Looking back on both of your careers, are there things that you look back now and think, oh, I wish I knew that when I first started, or what do you think you've learnt the most of? And both, I guess, from a a male female and your own confidence growing. What are the things that you wish you knew when you started?
I think perhaps when I started, I didn't aim high enough, perhaps. I remember at various points thinking to myself, oh, I think I'm a good number two, or I think I'm a good team player. If I went back, I'd probably say, don't limit yourself. Don't, just because I often have had a dynamic of working for a more senior male
Yeah.
and you've made that work, don't say to yourself, I'm a great number two, or I'm a team player. I think, and in some ways that was my person and is my personality. I would hope still that to be a team player and to not have a huge kind of focus on rank and trying to run a broadly flat team where everyone can input and everyone can have their opinions. But I think perhaps looking back, I would say to myself, just keep your ambition level really high. Just see where you don't start saying, oh, I think perhaps I could, stay here, or I seem to be okay at this level and doing well. Don't limit yourself. Always keep in your mind how far you can go. And for me, in a traditional finance route, I think I would have liked to have set my intention to be a CFO a little bit earlier instead of being, let me see where I am. Let me see, oh, this seems okay, or this level seems okay, and I can keep moving up. That's just my
Yeah.
reflections.
It's funny you say that because I think mine's probably slightly different,
Mm.
maybe bipolar opposite. So when I was at Amazon and at Sainsbury's, I was absolutely obsessed about getting promoted, and it all consumed me. You were like a C5, and I wanted to be a C6, and the C5s would be sat at lunch together, looking at the C6s, going, why am I not a C6? We're better than them, etc. And I would be in my one-to-ones, and my manager just being obsessive about getting to the next level. And I think it wasn't until I went to Pentland and I just enjoyed myself a bit more. And I just said yes to things. I was probably more likable and fun to be around, not just obsessing about what's next. And then I sort of relaxed into it, just enjoyed myself, and good things happened. I think the other thing I would I would say to myself, whilst aim high and have high ambitions,
Yes.
don't obsess about the next level. You hear that phrase, your career is a jungle gym, not a ladder. And I would definitely just relax into it a bit more, take myself less seriously, and just enjoy it a bit more. But the other thing I would say, and probably correlated with that time at Pentland, which is also when I met my husband, I think having this sense of self-worth and self-confidence outside of work really impacts me at work. And I see it so often with people that I work with. When they're happy outside of work, you can see it in work. They feel more able to take risks. They feel more confident to put themselves out there. They don't need so much validation from work experiences. So, having that self-worth outside of work, and seeking that maybe earlier on in my,
Yeah.
and not trying to get that from work so early on in my career, I think is really
I
important.
think it's something that disproportionately affects women, though. I mean, I look at it with my sister, who, when she went back to work after having 2 children, I felt her confidence had fallen so much, and it took her years to get that back. Both, I guess, it's the challenge of juggling both sides of your
Mm,
life,
mm, mm, mm.
and I think she felt as though she'd taken a few steps back in her career, and she was having to kind of almost prove herself back in the workplace. How did you manage that, having kids and coming back?
I think that's also goes back to choosing the place, choosing where you are, and there would have been some places where I would have had a very different return to work than what I did. Um, how did I manage it? Well, not very well at Purple Bricks, because I had a 5-month-old baby, and in my first 100 days of starting with a 5-month-old baby, I did a profit warning, put the business up for sale, had to find new ownership, and save it from administration. So I look back
Okay, that
then.
sounds
It was
horrendous.
awful. It was absolutely awful. Where do you grow in those spaces?
Yes.
But I look back now, I don't remember my son crawling. I haven't got any video. I don't remember him crawling. I look back now, and I was thrown into the most horrendous situation. I put myself there, to be fair. And so I think that doing those hard things gave me the confidence, and I didn't have the time or the capacity to feel fearful.
Yeah.
I also or to feel like I wasn't doing a good job. I had to do a good job because of the circumstances. I think in hindsight, I didn't have the balance right. And I regret that, because I didn't spend time with my young son. Whereas when I went back with my daughter, it was a very different story. I was in a much more stable position, and I was in a nice culture that sort of supported my return to work. So I've had 2 different return to work. I probably haven't answered your question at all, Devon. I'm sorry. But what I would say is being great at work is wonderful, but don't underestimate the sort of the shadow side of that, which is where I have regrets that I probably wasn't around. Well, I definitely wasn't around as much as I would have liked. And when I'm sort of later on in my life, I probably will regret that with some
Yeah.
gusto.
But it sounds like you had the opposite on your on second
Yeah, I
time.
did.
So
No, that was on my second time. On the first time, yeah, my poor second child. He's just, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you know what I think, and we can come on and talk about balance. But I might not have had it in that moment, but since then, we go on nice holidays, or I take time off in between roles, etc. And there's definitely been opportunities to get more of a balance. And so you don't get balance in one day or in one week. You get it sort of over the course of your.
and I think balance to everyone means such different things.
It's so
And I
individual.
absolutely
Yeah.
hate, you see it coming around at International Women's Day, and everyone's talking about,
Yes. Yeah.
oh, as a woman, how do you have it all? And I think, well, why do you never ask that question to the man who also has it
Mm.
all?
Mm, 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 mm.
Mm.
But it's such a, what works. And I say this because we've interviewed so many different women who have such different settings at home and in the workplace, and in very different roles and at varying levels of seniority. And I think it's just about what works for you, which will be entirely different to what works for somebody else. But there isn't a one size fits all, and there's no secret formula to having it all. And I think it's just, it sounds like you had some regrets, but then you made them right.
You do, and balance isn't in one. There'll be moments of balance throughout his life, and our relationship. That's the other thing. You sort of beat yourself up for not being there. My relationship with him is so strong. He's such a wonderful
Yeah,
little boy that you sort of beat yourself up for these moments, but it all works out.
yeah. In terms of tomorrow's kind of female leadership, or we talked about women kind of coming up the ranks. What do you think is important? What are the skills that you think that are important for them to have, or their mindset on how to be successful? Do you think that's changed since you were perhaps starting out in your careers?
I think there's probably more focus on different ways of working now. I started work in the 90s. It was probably still the culture of, career woman, all out, all hours. And back then, things have really shifted. No one would have spoken about mental health. No one would have talked about work-life balance in the way we do now, which is obviously a great positive change. So I think for women starting out, I'm hoping there's many different ways to follow a career. that perhaps wasn't the case 30 years ago, where it was a little bit more fit in with the kind of male model of do the hours, work hard, be in the office, be present, no working from home, no Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, quite a different place. So I think with my females, my younger staff, I try and encourage them to think about things quite early. Think about what they would like from not just career, but from their life. Start planning or looking at other women and seeing how they've done it. Examples of part time or flexi work, or, sometimes I think the reality, as Dominique was saying, sometimes the balance isn't perfect in this period of your life, and it can be in your next period. Or sometimes I imagine you feel, I don't have children, but I have two grown up stepsons. I'm sure sometimes you feel you're winning at your job and not doing so well on the parents or the home, or whatever your sort of home life looks like. I encourage people that I'm mentoring or working with to really have those conversations with women a little bit more senior or further or older or further down the career line, and start thinking what that looks like, and start perhaps not preparing yourself, but being open to life as a working mum, or life when you choose some time off, like you were saying with your sister. How does returning to work feel? And just really starting to think and hear about all those
Yeah.
different scenarios, I think is a great way to start thinking, what do I want my life to look like, and what are my options? Definitely. I think being quite vocal as to what works for you as well. I've got a couple of people either coming back from maternity leave or about to go off on maternity leave in my team at the moment, and we're just open to a really open dialogue. Or what is working for you? What could work for you? What could we do for you? Could you work, your last month that you're planning to be in work before going from home? Could that, I think, just ask and be open and explore all types of work balance and what things can look like. And hopefully we're becoming more and more flexible in a way that we haven't been before. Personally, I'd love to see more men take a bigger period of leave of paternity, or take more of the shared leave on offer. We don't see that taken up a lot. So I still think from the start, you quite often get the dichotomy of someone, if I think, a man has had a baby, takes 2 weeks off and then is back, and life sort of from the outside appears that he's able to travel for work and everything
Yeah.
very early on. And I think sometimes, that is a real struggle, certainly in private equity, with the international travel and deal deadlines and really long hours. It can be a different experience for the woman. Going forward, I'd love to see more sort of different solutions and more men taking some time off. So it's not such a gendered thing about return to work, which is really only spoken about in a female context at the moment, in the way we're saying so many things are only female: imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
work-life balance, how do you do it all, return to work, whereas it's all female. I guess my goal is that becomes men and women down the line, and the questions are asked for both.
Do you
But
think that's in the last 5 years? Do you think that's sort of turning? And do you think that is changing, or?
from my industry, I don't see too much change of men taking that kind of shared parental longer term leave on offer. And I wouldn't want everyone has to do, of course, what's right for their family. I just think standing back at 10,000 foot, it would be really lovely to see some guys do that, role model for younger people, and such that organizations don't think, oh, I've only got to think about this for my women in my 30s. And we start thinking about everyone being a young parent and not just gender assumption. But personally, I haven't seen a huge change in that.
Yeah.
And it may be my industry specifically.
We have, so at Boom Wild, we've had, in just the last 6 months, we've had 2 very senior men take parental leave, which is
So that's
fantastic.
amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I think it is changing,
Mm.
specific to industry
Mm.
and company. But that was one of the things I would urge sort of younger women, is to make sure that you've got equality or equity at home. Because I think if you, as you do progress up your career, whether you're running a house or a family, what have you, having that equity at home will enable you to have an equity at work. You can't have equality in the workplace if it's not
Yeah.
at home as well.
Yeah. Okay. Our final question is the same question that we ask at the end of all of the episodes. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
It's long ago. um, so I think going back to my point on aim high, I don't think I would have seen myself as a future CFO back then. I think I was more focused on sort of just doing a good job. And I love what Dominique says about ambition and her
Yeah.
drive. I think I would have advised that. I would have said you can be true to yourself. You can work in a male dominated field and still come in and, more crazy outfits, or
Yeah.
you don't have to do what we were saying about the shift dress and the dark navy suit. You can just be yourself and bring that outside work into work. I think personally as well, don't be afraid to be yourself. I'm quite an emotional person, and in some ways I'm like that at work as well, and don't be afraid of that. In some ways it just shows people you're human, you care about them, you care about your team, and bring that in. So I think it would all be sort of reassurance on be yourself, and that's fine, and it's going to work out for you in the future. Don't try and copy the navy suit, the male energy, just stay true to yourself,
Be
and
authentic.
it will work.
20 is very young. So I would say
Do we want to know what you were
no,
doing?
but so I
They
got
do
very
afterwards.
fast. I got really fast. I was very serious age 20. Actually, for my 21st birthday, my friends reminded me this the other day. I had the theme was dress up as if you're going to work. I had an apprenticeship. It was the apprentice theme for age 21. That's how seriously I took myself. I know. I took myself incredibly seriously, and I've definitely, you'll be pleased to know, taken myself less seriously as I've got older. We were just about to go on a placement year, and I was sort of very excited about the whole thing. So I would definitely say, like, it's a long old slog out there. So just relax, enjoy. I didn't go traveling or anything like that. So I would relax, enjoy it, and good things will come. And the other thing I would say is probably kiss a few less frogs and just spend time with these amazing women that, envelope yourself with these amazing women that you do, those friends that I have from when I'm 20, that we build each other up and cheerlead for each other now into our 40s. Well, I'm only just 40. But I think spend more time with those amazing women that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, and just relax and enjoy it. But yeah, I tried to go out too quickly, and
Do you
definitely
think that's driven you though for the rest of your career? I mean, it sounds like you were absolutely super ambitious and driven very, very early on.
No, I don't think I was very driven. I think I was very serious.
Yeah.
I think actually the more ambitious I've got is the less serious I've got. So I think, listen, I've always wanted to, my dad has his motto, if you're going to do something, do it properly. Whether that's loading the dishwasher or, doing your exams, do it properly. And so I've always wanted to do things to a high standard. But no, I think because I did a placement year, I was one of the youngest at PwC. I think I thought I had to take myself seriously to be taken seriously. And now I think I know actually I have to be myself and be authentic and be and have confidence, and that's how I'm going to be taken seriously. So I think actually it was in a bid to be this young woman trying to be taken seriously, and actually now I can relax into it a bit more.
So you didn't have a apprenticeship party for the 40s then?
No, I didn't. Very much not.
But echoing, I think, just the female friends point. I think that's super important. I know we focus more on career.
Yeah.
I'm a massive believer, and I just love all my friends from, early on, before anyone knew what someone was like in a career.
Yeah.
And I think the power of women and the network we can build, and we've known each other for years. It's just so lovely to have a kind of real support system. And I think going back to the work life, it's not always just a binary kind of career and husband family. It can also really be making time for those women that are supporting you as well
100%.
in the juggle.
And know that if you're 20 years old and you're listening to this, and if you are 20-year-old listening to a financial services female podcast on International Women's Day, I want you to put down your computer.
You're like, I would have been that person.
Yes, I would have. That would have been me. But go do something fun. I would have. But when you're 40, you have to make these real plans to see your friends for a weekend, sort of once every 6 months, and life just gets so busy and so difficult. So just envelope yourself in those amazing women and enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to hear more about both of your journeys, your advice. And I think picking up on what you've just said, it is amazing to now, I feel like I look at it in my own career, having more and more women that I think I interact with through my job, that you feel like, oh, they're kind of on my level and they're actually really authentic and they're not trying to be that male in a Dulcie.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing, I feel, to see that network grow.
Awesome.
And we're so fortunate to have women like you both in our network now. So thank you so much for sharing your stories and your journeys. And I'm sure there's loads that you've covered that will be super useful to the 20-year-old that is watching this on YouTube.
Shout out to
yes.
you.
Thanks for having us.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.